The creation myths of the ancient world remember a reverberating shout coming from heaven at the moment of creation. When the first light appeared, the Vedic god Indra, an avatar of Mars, roared with his attendant gods. In Central American lore, the first appearance of the morning star on the cosmic mount Amactan was attended by shouting. In the Bible, God himself acknowledged to Job the shout heard round the world. The morning stars were precisely the morning stars. They were the stars or planets at the morning of creation, Saturn, Venus, and Mars. They shouted and sang for joy amid the glory of creation. The mythic and scriptural records maintain that earthbound witnesses not only saw the explosion of light, but heard it as well. The sound of the explosion was interpreted to be a mighty shout, among other things. This raises an obvious question. Since sound cannot travel through a vacuum, then how did the sound of an event originating from one or more of the planets Saturn, Venus, or Mars reach Earth? Sound, as science defines it, is an audible vibration or wave that travels through a medium. It is also the reception and perception of that wave by the brain. Since sound is a wave or vibration, by its very nature it requires a medium to travel through. It requires some form of matter. Today's scientific community believes that outer space, the void between celestial bodies, is an almost perfect vacuum. Of course, this claim comes with a caveat. There actually is matter in the so-called vacuum of outer space. In other words, there is matter in outer space which constitutes a medium capable of propagating wave-like phenomena such as light and sound. Still, scientists claim that the vacuum of space is its fundamental state in an attempt to distance itself from earlier scientific models. Yet scientists cannot fully divorce themselves from the concept of an ether-like medium in space. Astronomers say that there is matter between star systems within a galaxy, including gas and dust. They call this matter the interstellar medium. Australian physicist Wal Thornhill has proposed that there is an ether in space, but that it is not recognized as such. The ether is simply composed of neutrinos. However science parses its claims, there is matter in space, and it is a medium for the propagation of sound. Nevertheless, neither the ether nor the galactic interstellar medium can explain the ancient claims that a loud roaring sound, interpreted as a shout, was heard from the planets above, Saturn, Venus, and Mars. We know the planets make sounds today, sounds which can only be received by specially designed antennas attached to probes during near flybys. Yet we cannot hear the sounds from the planets today without the aid of sophisticated technology in close proximity. The explanation for ancient mankind hearing loud sounds from the planetary creator gods can only be that these planets were very close to Earth and were physically connected through a sound-propagating medium. David Talbot describes the congregation of Saturn, Venus, and Mars above Earth's northern pole as being extremely close to Earth. So close were the planets that Saturn appeared to fill the sky, appearing much larger than our current moon at its fullest. The size of the configuration in this animation is a reasonable approximation of what the planets look like in terms of scale. The scriptures themselves provide ample evidence as to the very close proximity of these celestial bodies. The Book of Moses records that the ancient prophet Enoch regularly received communications from the Lord as he spoke to the prophet from heaven. The record is clear that the voice was audible and came from above. The voice speaking to Enoch cannot be construed to be coming merely from an undefined direction above. It came from a clearly specified location above the earth, a location from which angels descended and to which humans ascended. It had a name, Zion. What Enoch saw and heard were in vision, like Jacob's dream of the ladder with ascending and descending angels. However, what Enoch saw was not symbolic, but a literal observation of future events. In fact, the vision occurred after he and his city Zion had been taken up into heaven. It was from this vantage point above the earth that Enoch beheld the angels descending, the righteous ascending, and heard the voice of the Lord to the inhabitants of the earth. The knowledge of the ascent of Enoch and his city into heaven, meaning a specific location directly above the earth, was not forgotten. The tale of the Tower of Babel makes sense only within the context that heaven was not only near the earth, but attainable by building and then climbing a tower. Many consider the story to be purely mythological. There is good reason for this belief. The biblical story is mythological. But there was also a real tower, as we learn from the account of Aether in the Book of Mormon. The biblical account is vague as to the purpose of the tower, except that its goal was to reach unto heaven. We know from Joseph Smith and his associates that the building was entirely logical, if not misguided. Apostle Orson Pratt, who likely got his information from Joseph, explained the building of the tower in a discourse in 1873. According to Apostle Orson F. Whitney, Joseph Smith was even more clear on the topic. Joseph stated that not only did the people of Babel remember the translation of the city of Zion, its physical location was still visible above the earth. The identity of the heaven above the earth is actually named in the Bible. Babel, as Eduardo Cardona pointed out, does not refer to the confusion of tongues, but is a reference to the tower's intended destination. The heaven above was Saturn. We can draw some overall conclusions from the stories of Enoch and the tower. First, during the presence of the polar configuration, there were periodic verbal communications between personages from heaven above with mankind below. Second, since verbal communications occurred between the planets, this indicates that the voice-like sounds from the planets above could also be transmitted to the earth below. The shout of creation could be heard by the inhabitants of the earth. Third, there was periodic migration of human beings living on earth to the planet or planets above, and vice versa. Angels descended and humans ascended. Each of these conclusions presupposes a physical connection between the planets. There was a medium that transmitted sound and one that allowed the movements of human beings between the planets. Sound must have a medium to travel through. The medium must be a form of matter, solid, liquid, gas, or plasma. In space, the primary medium connecting planets, stars, and galaxies is plasma. Celestial bodies are normally electrically connected through plasma phenomena called Birkeland currents. Our Earth is electrically connected to the Sun by means of the solar wind. The solar wind is a flow of charged plasma streaming outward from the Sun. The solar wind intersects at Earth's aurora zones, creating plasma formations, the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis. A similar situation existed during the presence of the polar configuration, except that the plasma was much more energetic, creating discharges between the planets. David Talbot explains.
In an electric solar system, if two planets or moons approach each other from regions of different potential, electric discharge will occur, producing plasma formations stretching between the approaching bodies.
The currents, when visible, took many forms. At times, they were even visible from the southern hemisphere. It was the plasma extending between the planets that transmitted sound to the Earth to be heard by mankind. How was this done? In space, energy is propagated as electrical waves through the interstellar medium or along Birkeland current transmission lines. Only when these electrical or electromagnetic waves encounter a planet with an atmosphere do they become sound. When electromagnetic wave phenomena are introduced into an atmosphere, the oscillations become acoustic vibrations in the air. Electromagnetic waves become audible sound. It is this effect, the transduction of electrical energy into acoustic energy, that forms the basis of plasma speakers and ionophones. The shout of creation was the sound created by an explosive discharge of the planet Venus. The sound was visible and reverberating. The explosive Venusian discharge created what is known as an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP for short. Lightning, for example, creates EMPs. In order to have reached the Earth, the electromagnetic pulse must have followed the lines of transmission between the planets, the Birkeland currents. Initially, the EMP would have reached the magnetosphere and atmosphere of Mars. But, like the solar wind, the pulse would have continued past the red planet and followed the paths of the Birkeland currents connecting Mars and Earth. Upon reaching the Earth, the electrical oscillations caused by the explosion and transmitted by plasma interacted with the atmosphere, forming the sound waves heard by mankind and interpreted as a shout.